Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to another thought leadership session. And on this one, I'd like to welcome Hans van Bruggen. And actually, I just realized, Hans, that this is the first time that we could have done this session with the both of us in Dutch, in the Dutch language. But of course, with that, we would have lost probably 99% of our audience. So welcome, Hans. Brief introduction about who Hans is. Hans is our Chief Scientific Officer at Celligence. He has an MSc in Pharmaceutical Medicine from the University of Surrey and has worked within or for the pharmaceutical industry for more than 40 years now in global or European headquarters. Hans, 40 years, that is a mighty long time. He's gained a wealth of experience and a comprehensive view on what information is needed to evaluate the benefit-risk ratio of drugs for patients and healthy volunteers. Using that scientific background, he approaches interdisciplinary and international processes related to data, documents, and dossiers. Welcome, Hans.
Thank you very much, Geert.
And good seeing you again. We're going to talk about PDFs in this session and how we can unlock the value that is in those PDFs. Because we realize that actually since the late 80s, early 90s of our last century already, dossiers have been replaced by PDF submissions. Initially, it was files and folder structures that were used. Later on, ECTD was agreed. And then all of a sudden, we had digitized or digitalized paper, and information was now locked up in PDF rather than in paper documents. As standard became mandatory, as we all know, in the 2000s in various regions, and is still being used up to today. Over time, we saw more and more countries asking for structured data, and the lack of a common exchange standard for this is still limiting some of the success of these initiatives. Even when the exchange standard is available, there still is a huge legacy that somehow needs to be transferred from PDF to a data standard. So whether you like it or not, PDF will be around for the next 10 years or so, and there will be an enormous amount of data still available in PDFs that will be locked up in PDF documents. So through that short introduction, Hans, I actually get to my first question. With all of this information, knowing this, how can we make use of the hidden value of sometimes the treasures that are in those PDFs within the vast amounts of PDFs within your organizations? How would you go about that?
Yeah, thanks for this introduction and also for this question, because like you said, the PDF files will be around there for many more years. Even if now, let's say, IDMP would become available, then still we need to submit PDF files for Module 3, because at this moment, IDMP is just on top of the existing dossiers, and it is not replacing the parts of the documents, for example. So those PDFs should be available for, let's say, full text search. That is the minimum requirement. Because if we have those dossiers, and there is a very strong focus on initial MAAs, but if you see that the number of initial MAAs a year at the EMA might be maybe 200 initial MAAs to be submitted at the EMA a year, but we might submit maybe 50,000 or maybe 100,000 variation dossiers and response documents and so many others. So the number of documents where our regulatory information is a multitude of just the initial MAA that we have sent. And for the health authorities, it is their regulatory dossier for that particular product on that particular from that particular applicant. They will definitely also do comparisons from the dossiers from other applicants, and then they would like to see that information in context of a related product. It might also be at the industry side that we do not only submit to the EMA, but we submit to 150 countries worldwide. And what have we submitted where? And if there is a particular change And that is, for example, a supplier of one of the ingredients, one of the APIs changes. Where do I have to submit then an updated dossier? And that is something where at this moment the industry takes about 2 weeks to figure out what the regulatory impact is of a particular change. And that is because they have to open all of the dossiers, what they have submitted, and particularly, of course, the latest versions of those documents to see which manufacturer has been used for which API, for example. And let's say that it is a named API for a named manufacturer. They have to go to all of the dossiers, ripple down to the 32S21 or to the 32P31, for example, to open it and to read, okay, now I see it is this manufacturer for that particular API. And then they have to check that and maintain that either in a Word document or in a spreadsheet. And they have to collect that for all those 150 countries. And it might be that that active substance is used also for multiple pharmaceutical products. So it is not 150 countries times 1, it might be 150 countries times 2 different products, 3 different products. And it takes about 2 weeks at least, but I've talked also to other companies and they said, no, this will take up to 8-9 weeks, because we might find a solution that looks plausible, that is the outcome of that question, but then it takes them so many weeks to verify whether that is correct. Now, we have our regulatory dossiers, but we only explore them one by one and document by document. So if we are able to extract or to at least absorb the information from those regulatory dossiers much faster, then we can do a regulatory impact assessment on the fly. And maybe you can show that particular slide that we have created. Thank you. So what you see here, we have done a search across all the dossiers in a particular system. And that is, in this case, it is about 25-30 different demo dossiers, but it could also be that you have here 1,000 dossiers. And those 1,000 dossiers, then you can do a search for, in this case, we would like to remove titanium dioxide as a coloring agent from our tablets. Then I can search, as you can see here, for the word titanium. It can search across all your dossiers, all your PDF files, not only all the PDF files, but in case of, let's say, data sets for the US, you can also search across data sets. And on the fly, you get an outcome and you will see, I have so many hits. And then on the right-hand side, as you can see there, you can start filtering. And that is what is important, that we have, first of all, the number of hits, the number of occurrences that the word titanium occurs across all those dossiers. And then that we narrow down to the documents where we would like to change that. And that is, for example, first of all, it has to be all the current documents, because if they are not current, then I don't care about that. If it is already replaced and therefore it's obsolete document, I don't care. I would like to have the current documents. And then subsequently, I don't know, I would like to have that where titanium is part of my composition. So if it is composition, I know exactly where to find that composition, and that is 32P1. So I can filter then on 32P1. And as you can see here, based on this search, we know exactly in how many dossiers we have this titanium dioxide still in the current dossier in the description and composition. And that concerns those dossiers, those product groups, those product names, and all that kind of information. So there is a lot of information locked up within your dossiers, but it is important that we are able to get that out. And this is a way how you can get that out of the existing dossiers, the legacy, but also the future dossiers that will also be still in PDF. Did that answer your question? I know it's a long answer, but I hope I've made that
thank you, Hans. That did answer my question. Which brings to me, actually, to the next question. Once we have that information, how can we make sure that we can accurately compare and verify across all of those documents?
Well, to across all of those documents, that would be really nice. I've had that question before, that we would have all of the documents, for example, where we have that word titanium dioxide, and then that we could have all the documents next to each other, for example, in a kind of spreadsheet, and that it compares all the information in there. But then what is your master? What do you want to compare it against? And that is still something that is doable as well. So we have seen that question very often. I have had that question when I was working within regulatory affairs in the 90s. I have had those questions very much. At that time, we had to look into the paper, and at a certain time, we got core dossier and we got the CTD. No, not the CTD documents at that time, but it were PDF documents. Still a lot of searches, and the comparisons were to be made document by document, row by row. And of course, there are tools that can do a document comparison and then within PDF. But if we have those dossiers, and that is also in the slide that I have up, yes, there. So now, for example, I took the document where we had titanium dioxide in there, and I said, okay, can you do a comparison now between the document in sequence number 0 and the document in sequence number 1, which is considered the current document? And then on the fly, you can get this type of information where you see where it corresponds and where it is all the same information, but you immediately also see where the differences are. And this is a very powerful thing. Then we do know, yes, this has been corrected the right way. I could also do a comparison not only between the documents, but could also say, give me the document that is at this moment valid within the EU, and compare that to the document that is valid in Algeria, for example. So also those kind of comparisons can be done. Still, this is something that at this moment is a one-to-one, but that can be done. Another feature that can also be applied, because we come across that if we go to Brazil, for example, we take Brazil, then the text for Module 3 is in Portuguese or in Brazilian Portuguese. And how can I do that comparison then? Well, then you can do also an instant translation of that Portuguese to English, and subsequently you can do that comparison. Well, that translation, of course, is not a certified translation, so there might still be some flaws in there, but you can also get a very quick reassurance about the differences between what we have submitted in Brazil compared to what we have submitted in Portugal, for example. So yes, even here, this is important that we can do those comparisons of the content of the PDF files.
Thank you very much for clarifying, and that indeed answers my question. Maybe across all documents was a kind of a very ambitious question, but a dream. Which brings me to actually the next topic. Okay, we've talked about PDF, how we can unlock value that is within the documents, how we can verify, compare documents. But there's also initiatives around, for example, IDMP. But how do you see the role of or the future role of initiatives such as IDMP and PQ-CMC? How do you see that?
Well, that depends. In my introduction, I already touched upon that a little bit. If IDMP is to replace other documents within the regulatory dossier, then I think it is to the best advantage. But if IDMP is on top of what we already submit, then we have multiple things that we have to keep compliant. Because what is IDMP about? Thanks for presenting this. Because if we take IDMP, and you know that wedding cake there in the middle, then IDMP is actually to ensure regulatory compliance. And what do we mean with regulatory compliance? That is that we practice what we preach. And that means that what we have approved in our regulatory dossier, based on that CTD, where we have Module 1, the Quality Overall Summary, Module 3, all of that information is in there. And then we get a marketing license. But a marketing license by itself is not sufficient to market a product. You also have to ensure that the manufacturers, the sites, and also testing sites that are involved for the production and supply of that particular marketed product, that is compliant. How do you know whether that is compliant? Well, then they will do, and that is then the health authorities, they will inspect the various sites involved. And if they pass that inspection, then the manufacturers might receive a GMP inspection, or the clinical study sites might receive a GCP certificate. The non-clinical sites might receive a GLP certificate. Distribution sites might receive a GDP certificate. And that is where they have checked what is happening within that, let's say, GMP environment, that all of that information is stored correctly, that it is first of all recorded correctly, stored correctly, and that it is done as agreed within the procedural document. So all your SOPs, work instructions, that the product is manufactured as laid down in that part. But then the health authorities, they had an issue. Because they said, but how do we know that the data that is being used within the GMP environment equals the data that we have, the data that we have then in the regulatory dossier? And because the health authorities had to open then those dossiers, have to figure out where that data is, and in the old days, when there were still paper dossiers, you can imagine that those inspectorates did not have that data at hand when they do an inspection. Now, if it is electronically available, they do have the regulatory dossier at hand. And they can, if they want, they are able to open the dossier and go to the Module 3 to compare with what is written in Module 3 is aligned with what is written in the SOPs and work instructions and validation report and process validation report, what is captured also in your pharmaceutical quality management system, for example. So that is what it is about. Do we practice what we preach? Is our regulatory dossier in line with what we actually do in the production and supply chain? What we actually have in our SMPC and our package leaflet that is on the market. So how do we do that? Well, the health authorities had some issues with that. They said, we can't do that because we don't have the data. Yeah, the data is locked in PDFs, but that is too difficult to get that data. And therefore they said, let's go for XEVMPD. That was in 2012, the first thing that they said, we do not want to have an SMPC as a document anymore. We would like to have the data from the SMPC in a database approach. And that was XEVMPD. Now they went a step further because they saw that all pharmaceutical companies were submitting their XEVMPD data, and one called it a modified release tablet, another one a prolonged release tablet, the third company called that an extended release tablet, and they all meant the same. So that is why SPORE came in to come up with controlled vocabularies, that we do not only have then the data elements that have to be populated, but also controlled vocabularies. And IDMP goes much further and takes, instead of only the SMPC data, it takes also Module 3 data. Now, your question was related to what is the role of future initiatives like IDMP and PQ CMC. Actually, the role that was originally intended was that the health authorities could do a quick check whether adverse events could be correlated to a particular product, or maybe to a particular strength of the product, or maybe to a particular pharmaceutical formulation, or maybe to a particular API manufacturer, or maybe to a particular packaging, or to a particular indication. So that is why they have said we would like to have IDMP, because then we can correlate effects, not necessarily safety effects, but that was the driver. That was why it was captured under the pharmacovigilance regulation. But actually it is, they would like to have instant capability to do the analysis of analyzing products and correlate that to adverse events, correlate that to maybe a better efficacy profile. That was what they wanted to do. Now they go further, and particularly the FDA goes further, because the FDA says if we have so far any further questions? Geert.
Just unmuting here. No, Hans, no questions. Very clear, but no questions came in. I'm double checking. No, we're good.
No. Okay, good. So what is then what FDA would like to achieve with PQ-CMC? They do not just want to have the data on top of their regulatory dossier. What the FDA wants, they say, we would like to have a more objective evaluation of the regulatory dossiers and not be limited to the subjectivity of an assessor. Even if the assessor wants to be as objective as possible, there will also be some subjectivity to that. And they also would like to make a comparison for similar products. So, hey, here I have a particular type of product, there I have a similar kind of product. What were the results? How have they done their pharmaceutical development? What can we learn from the quality by design studies? What do we know about the acceptance criteria? What do we know about the specifications? And what do we know about the test methods that have been selected for a similar product, but just two different applicants? And they would like to do these kind of objective comparisons. And also what they would like to do is say, okay, I do know that, for example, and I'm making this up now, but wet granulation is something that is well established. Dry granulation is something that is more complicated. There are more risks associated to that. So they would like to have a computer-assisted review where they say, hey, there is something like wet granulation or dry granulation that is at higher risk, and we will also already, the system will already tag that there is a higher risk. Now, they would like to combine that also with their GMP inspections. So if they do inspections of testing sites, for example, or production sites, then they see which sites have a thorough understanding of such a wet granulation, for example. And if they do the wet granulation, it's fine. But they have also done some inspections at other sites, and there the wet granulation, that could have been done better. That was not that well established and also not that well developed. So they had some remarks on that. And that means that if you have a combination of, for example, wet granulation combined with a particular manufacturer, that contributes to the risk. And they would like to do a risk-based analysis of their dossier, because you cannot do everything. So that is where they would like to use CASA, that computer-assisted systematic assessment. And that is to increase the objectivity, to increase also the speed, and to increase the thoroughness of the review. And to allow them to do that, they have to have PQ-CMC. They call that PQ-CMC. ISO and EU call that IDMP, but it is a lot about exactly the same elements. Now, there's also something else that's coming up, and that is ICH M4Q. ICH M4Q, that is, and M4 describes what goes into module, M4Q describes what goes into module 3, for example. And what they would like to change there is that the factual information about all the CMC information, so just the facts, that factual information goes into a database approach, and that the scientific evaluation goes into module 2.3. Nowadays, module 2.3 is nothing more than a summary. It is not a scientific evaluation. It's not a critical overview like with the non-clinical and clinical overviews. It is just a summary. There is also a scientific evaluation in module 3, and that is within, for module 3 to S, it is the manufacturing development, manufacturing process development, S26. It is also P2, and P2 is the entire development of your pharmaceutical product. Why have you selected this particular active substance? Why have you selected this particular excipients? What is the role? What is the function? Sorry for that. Why have you selected this particular formulation? Why have you developed a formulation that has to be given every other day, for example? Well, if you give that every other day, there will be a lot of incompliance with the therapy, because every other day that will be forgotten, and therefore once a day is something that you can easily do. 3 times a day during the meals is also something that is doable, even 2 times a day. But if you would develop something that is only 2 times, or let's say that's only 4 times a day, or that is every other week is good. No, every week, that's good, because then you can say every Monday you have to take this medicine. But if it is every 3 weeks, that makes it already very complicated, and people will forget about that. So all that kind of justification is a scientific evaluation why you developed something, a tablet of this particular size with that amount, and or an infusion bag with this amount. That is all to be justified. That is in a scientific document. That is your pharmaceutical development. Why have you selected these manufacturers? Why have you this analytical method? Why have you selected this particular process? How can you ensure that those processes will result in a robust and high quality product? How can you ensure that if you have some variability, that the process is still resulting in a high quality drug of a consistent batch to batch comparison? So that is the scientific evaluation. Now that is in pharmaceutical development, like I said, P2. That is also in the process validation, in the method validation. And those scientific evaluations will in the future be in module 2.3, while the factual data about all of the tests that have been done, all that factual data, also about description of your method, also about description of your manufacturing process, will be in module 3, but then in a more database approach. And with ICH M4Q, we will get to the stage that module 3 will result in something like a database. We do not have to create those PDF files anymore. Module 2 will be narratives, will be scientific evaluation, and that still goes into the PDF files. And that is where I see the future of IDMP and PQ CMC, to replace module 3. Maybe also to replace the product information, and that eventually that might become our electronic product information, the EPI. Geert, did that answer your question?
That more than answered my question, and thank you, Hans, for giving us a glimpse into the future, and another proof how a short question can lead to a very extensive answer. So thank you very much for that, Hans. I'm looking at the clock and I see that we're that it's 5:30, at least it is in Belgium. So with this, I'd like to thank you, Hans, for being our guest today on this thought leadership session. Thank you to our visitors, to our watchers for joining this webinar. Also, want to remind everybody that this session will be available for the long future on our group on LinkedIn, which is called Accelerating eCTD Submissions. So if you want to share this information with anybody, please do so. It will be made available right after this session. So again, Thank you to our audience. Thank you to Hans for joining us. Wishing everybody a fantastic rest of the day or evening. Yeah, hope to see you soon. Thank you, Hans, again. Yeah.
Thank you. And if we can also continue these kind of discussions on LinkedIn, I think.
Absolutely. There's you can always comment and continue to comment on the on this session, which will remain open. So open for questions there and for personal interactions. All right. Again, bye, Hans.
Thanks, Geert.
Good seeing you. Bye-bye.
Bye all. Bye-bye.